continuing with the animation builder exercise, or I don't know if it's an exercise, it's a piece of software I'm building. And yesterday I came up to, I've got to this point where I still, for about 2 days now, I've had the ability to drag this around and have it snap to a frame. This is the playhead. This is the timeline. These are 3 keyframes that should cause this little square to bounce, and it would be an animation of this thing bouncing, hitting the bottom and bouncing back up. The idea is that this is going to, well, as of yesterday, I have this notion of a timeline model that you can ask it for a particular frame, and it will tell you for every one of the tracks what the value of that track should be. So these are all properties, and so what are the values of the properties at each one of those tracks, at each particular frame. And so now I just need to say, well, okay, when I land on a frame, let's actually match up the properties that I'm changing with the values that should be there, and then set those values if they have changed. So that's the goal for today. I believe everything is checked in. Yes, everything is checked into the TS Faro repository right now. That may move in the future, but that's where it is right now. And yeah, so the top level object or whatever is called the GS animator. So if I run one of those, I get a GS, this is the GS animator. And what I need to do now is I need to, well, it has a event that happens on frame changed. And right now, all it does is it updates this little label at the top. But what it should do is it should ask the timeline or the timeline model for the information necessary to update the scene. So let's do that. And I think I'm going to, since I know what this thing is, I'm just going to hard code what it is for now and just get that working. And then we'll start adding more things to the scene, or more properties to the scene. Like I'm going to have this stretch and squash, so we're going to do some sizing and things like that. And yeah, so let's start with that. So what do we do? Well, first of all, I'm going to hit this button so that I get a new copy of it over here. I'm going to shrink my little head down. And then, oh, no, that's not what I want. I want to run this piece of code so I actually get one with the scene in it. Because right now there are no tracks, and by default there are no tracks and nothing in the scene. So we need the example with the scene in it. All right, there we go. And I changed that name to view model yesterday. Values for frame 19. That should say, that should, there's only one track. So this is a list of all the values for the properties, which I need to now list, now need to zip with the, or process alongside the parallel array that tells me what the track names are, what the properties are on the track. Presumably that would be cached, and so I don't need to get their names every time. I just need the actual list of values for the properties. I'm going to move this down because this is less important than that. All right, and then what I need to do is I need to I need to figure out what the method is that I'm going to call. So I'm tempted to name that position. So it's called relocate because you can't directly set the position most of the time in block. But I think for the objects that are in a scene like this, you should be able to do that. For objects that are in a scene, I think that makes sense. And maybe what I'll do is I'll block does not have a concept of there's no rectangle class. You have an element that has a geometry, and that geometry has a border, and that, you know, and things like that. But I think for what I'm doing here, maybe I want to introduce some objects that have those properties. So there actually would be a rectangle element and an ellipse element or an oval element, things like that. I don't know. We'll see. And then it would be positioned that way. The track name and is mapped to a property, and the property is the setter, is the same symbol that we send to the thing. Or I could just have a dictionary that sends these things. So for in any case, let's just say, let's go ahead and say that we'll get the values. So we're going to make, when the frame changes, we're going to get a prop values. And we're going to say prop values, prop values is equal to timeline, this right here, timeline view model values for frame. Great. And we'll give this frame, so frame would be an event frame. And then prop values at 1 should give me this point right here, whatever the point is for that particular frame, and timeline view model values for frame. And then we're going to say self-seen child named. Again, we're hard coding this, so self-seen child named square relocate prop values at 1. Okay. Alternatively, what I could do is I make a different kind of track, like subclass this, make different kinds of tracks for different kinds of properties, and the property track would just know what to do. All right, anyway, so if I run this by clicking that button again, nope, can't do that. Got to do this. I think this starts to work now. Boom, boom, boom. Super awesome animation, dude. All right, well, thank you for watching. I'm going to put this up on the App Store, and now you can make your own teleporting box videos. Now, obviously, this is just the first step of many. So I guess the next thing would be Tweens. So I'm going to go ahead and commit this. Even though this is just kind of a stub, I think this is the only thing I've changed, and it's, it's not really good code. This is just, I'm going to add this as like a checkpoint, right? Because this is what I've been, kind of anticlimactic, right? Okay, so GS animator add stub to actually change the animation, actually change the scene. Add stub with hard coded. for one hard coded, yeah, for exactly one hard coded track. It's not a good, it's not like it's a trivial piece of code, right? It's only a couple lines, but like that's what we've been building up to. So that was a milestone. Okay, so I'm glad that works. One more thing I want to try just to double check. So if I just hold this now, yeah, it does its own. Did it? Right. So yeah. So as soon as we hit that point, it moves to the bottom. Okay. So now we need to make these be, rather than just individual frames, I want to make them tweens. right, so I think what I'm going to do, I need to do a little bit of design work here because I don't know exactly what the plan is here. So I think every time I see this, I think it's a Lepiter thing. Lepiter is the thing for making books, right? For making documents. So that icon really should be something else like that. This is the icon for the class. That is not a class. That icon does not say class to me. It says book. Okay, so anyway, actually, this is where I'm at. You just go to this left side. I think I have a lot. Something that says animation app. Yeah. Okay. So scene editor, right? I never really built a scene editor yet. Animation timeline. Animator. So yeah, as it says, it builds on this GS scene editor thing. I don't know that there actually is such a thing. I guess there is. By adding a tree and an inspector. Okay. Well, okay. So the way it works, we have GT class. Come on. Really slow. Super slow. I'm not getting any auto completion. So GS timeline model. Is this a Pharaoh thing? Is that why? No. Pharaoh's in a different, okay. It's just going really slow. Using up 2 gigabytes now, so something is happening here. It's very high. What is it doing? Doing something on the CPU. Garbage collecting? What are you doing? What are you doing, GT? There we go. It did something. Okay. And that should change into something else. Is something running? I don't think so. I believe there's a process browser in here. I haven't found it terribly useful yet, but maybe it'll help right now. It just suddenly became incredibly unusable. I don't want to kill it, but come on, wake up. Like it's doing something. I can interrupt it with the control dot. Normally that brings up a debugger. You can't have this in an animation app. It's not, it cannot be allowed. You cannot be allowed to do that. What does monitor do? Oh. Services, processes. I don't think you can see like what are the, what's actually taking the most space. Ooh, the mocked universe. Yeah, I guess I just haven't really understood what this is for and like what I can do with it yet. One thing that I've noticed is that there, GS Glamorous Toolkit has the ability to work with remote sessions. So it is possible to use this as your development environment and actually build an environment in like a traditional Pharaoh using like Morphic or something. And so it might be the case that it would make more sense to just have a stock Pharaoh application if I want to ship something, right? Like strip down Pharaoh to like the bare minimum because GT adds a bunch of stuff that we don't need. I don't need. And use just install block and then run the graphics environment and run that inside of the standard Morphic environment that comes with Pharaoh. I don't know. This is all that doesn't matter. That's like way down the line. I am thinking about opening this up and using and offering building a community around this tool, right? But the tool has to exist first. So let's worry about that later. Okay, so in that case, forget about this. What I was trying to do, it seems like whatever it's doing is it's now down to 1%. It's stopped doing it. It's still taking up a lot of memory, but it's recovered. So I gave it enough time. Right, I'm going to talk about GT timeline model. I'm going to make a very small page here. It just says GT timeline model controls what happens in, contains we're back to 10%. GT class GS track model objects that specify changes to properties to any BL element, property changes for any BL element for any BL element on each frame. I'm waiting for the enter to go through. Back up to 11% on my CPU. Come on. This is unusual. This does not usually happen. It has happened before. And the guys from Think were a little skeptical that it happens, but it happens. So Think is the people that make Glamorous Toolkit. But I don't know why it's happening. I can't like reproduce this on the fly. I don't know why it's happening. All right, so GS timeline contains, yeah, right. So the elements should be named objects in a GT class GS scene and GT class GS animator has the responsibility to display the class GS timeline to frozen again. I may have to just like save everything and kill it, but what is it doing? It can't be this much garbage collection, right? Like garbage collection pauses it for like, you know, a frame or two, not. What are you doing? What is this thing doing? I'm gonna kill all these windows. Start. If I could, I will. When it becomes responsive again, I'll do it. I'm not gonna debug this on screen. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna save it, save the image, and then kill it. But I think if I just do that, it's going to restore it to this exact same state, right? We'll find out. I'm still waiting on an enter. Maybe it's the act of pressing enter that is causing this like severe. That would be something, right? Also, until this little thing turns green, you don't want to end it because that's like what is saving your changes, right? Come on. All right, I'm just gonna kill it. I'll take a screenshot of what I posted. That way I can rewrite it if I lose it. And then I'm just gonna kill it, I guess. There we go. You know, it occurred to me they're in their development process, they tend to start with a brand new image every day. Like they have a build, so they just like have everything saved and they just fire up a new image every day. I leave mine open overnight, and that's something I'm doing that the Fink team does not do, as far as I know. So I brought this up. It always opens this little morphic window for some reason. Right. I suspect, since I didn't save it after the, yeah, we're detached working copy, so we repair this. Is it gonna wipe out the, well, if I lose it, I lose it. It shouldn't wipe out the Lepiter pages. It should only wipe out the. Yeah, whatever. Okay. Doesn't matter. Animation app is where I was at. Oh, that's interesting. The now glamorous toolkit is at 2%. That's a very, very sensible, right? What's happening here? Pending changes, yeah, sync. I don't know how often that runs, but okay. All right, so now if I go to TS Pharaoh, does it show my changes? It does. And I think Scene Editor had changed slightly too, but there's nothing in Scene Editor, so that doesn't matter. Okay, so yeah, kind of weird. All right, so I'm going to save this whole state just so that next time I restart it doesn't cause a problem. Sphero, GS timeline. I'm not trying to write a book here on camera, right? I just want to like kind of keep some rough notes. Okay, and so when I click on that, I actually just save this. Seems like a good starting page. Animation timeline. This moves it to its own window. Yeah. Animation timeline. Right, what is it I was actually trying to do? I was trying to introduce tweens. So I want to talk about the notion of tweens. GS timeline. I don't want GS tween because that obviously doesn't exist, but I think in this example application that's in the docs, they actually have something about like animation in there. Hmm. Actually, the die does not have animation, so I don't know where the word tween got found on here. They have notions of animation, but they don't have a thing called tween. All right, so so the GS animator has the responsibility to display the GS timeline and the GG class GS scene, and to update the scene when the playhead moves on the timeline. GG class GS timeline. GS timeline owns the owns the GS timeline model, and well, and the timeline model, as I said already here, contains actually, let's do it up here. Let's actually which the GS timeline owns the GS timeline model, which contains GS track model objects that specifies property changes for any BL element on each frame. The elements on each frame. The elements should be for in a GS scene. Okay. And the GS scene entered updated scene when the playhead moves on the timeline. Okay. Then we say something about GS track model, GT class, GS track model contains everything, contains the complete timeline for one object's property during an animation. So we have tracks. So let's make a separate item called tracks. GS track model contains the complete timeline for one object's property during an animation. For a single property, for an object, for a single property on a single object across the duration of, across the entire timeline. The timeline represents a single animation. The track model maintains a cache of the property value at any given frame. It does this by interpolating, or by what? By looping through. It builds the cache. It builds the cache in GT method GS. What is it going to be? Which one am I looking for? GS timeline? No, GS track model. GS track model build cache. By looping through, and then if I click on that, I should see the information, right? Yeah, I should see the. By looping through the keyframes, the tracks associated keyframes. Keyframes, a keyframe, which is not yet a class, sets, I'm going to bold this because it probably will be a class in a minute. A keyframe specifies the value of the property or associates a frame number with a particular value. So then I'm trying to think, like, how do I want to model the idea of a tween? Because a keyframe does not. It's really like a tween owns two keyframes. But it can't own it because. Right, see, so you got like a keyframe here, K0. Let's do it like this. You got K0, and then you've got K1, and then you got K2. So these are keyframes, and they have values. But the tween is going to be, between those two, and then there's another tween between these two, potentially. So you need to look ahead. You need to have a window of 2 frames at a time, and you have to say, well, is the I think we would say, usually when it's drawn, in a like Blender or something. Oops, sorry. The way I see it drawn usually is something like this. The line executes out to here, and then we start the new keyframe. And then if it also has a tween, then it goes out to here, and it ends right, and the box for that thing ends right before the next guy. Right? Right, and then say if way out here there's no tween, there might be a key 3. Right? And because there's no tween here, the box ends right here. And then this wouldn't have a line in it. And like if it's a frame by frame animation, you might be doing something like this, like no tweens, because you're just setting everything explicitly on each frame. So I think what happens is the keyframe, the box that you're clicking on, would have a tween associated with it, and like a duration, right? Well, it knows the duration from. It only knows the duration based on the next item, right? We have this thing called a run array, right? And where you have a run and the values, right? Run is like how long does this thing last, the duration of the element, and the value is like what is the value at that spot, and then. But it's not quite what we need because the value changes. But the notion that you're dealing with a particular keyframe for that duration is very similar. Like to draw this on the screen, we're going to need to know the start and end points, like how the width of each in cells of the width and the duration in frames of each keyframe. So when we ask for keyframes here, the way keyframes currently work, I mean, you never explicitly give it a duration. What you do is you have two keyframes, and then you say, is there a tween in between them? And you generally, I would think that that is associated with the first frame. Because you would draw it as a box with one frame. But it's kind of, it's kind of, like, really, I'm just saying, is there a line there or not? So, so we could either say that there's a mix of keyframes and tweens, or we could say the keyframe has a key associated with it. Right now, I'm doing this with. So if I make a Pharaoh snippet here, and that is GS animator. No, GS animator examples. Bouncing square. And if you look inside a bouncing square, this is what it looks like right now. It's simply a point, simply points. So what would I want it to be instead? Maybe a list? Yeah. And then we would give it what? GS tween. And then like some kind of easing, right? Some kind of, so linear. And I think we could, so bounce out. I think it's just, for now, we could just even just say BL easing bounce out, right? Then I don't even have to make anything. BL easing bounce out. BL easing. If I browse that, what do I have in there? Bounce in, bounce out, linear. There's like a bunch of these that are like standard, right? I could make all these very quickly. By porting them from the standard easing. Right? There's like a page that has all of them. I'm sure many pages that have all of them. Is there anything else to a tween than that? We could even just have the symbol, right? We don't need to make this an object. We could say bounce out or linear. That worked, but I think as soon as I drag this, it's gonna break, yeah. Array did not understand extent, right? I tried to explicitly use that as a point. This is I think having the keyframe be an association between I think that's good enough for now. Making it like this is good enough for now. And if there's no second element, then it's just I need a GS keyframe to hold that information. Like I want to save it like this on disk. Maybe not exactly like this, but this concept. You've got the key, the value, which would be encoded in some way that can be serialized, and then a symbol representing the easing function. I'm gonna fire up Godot and Blender real quick. Godot. I want to see what they do. Godot. I don't know where all my Godot projects went. I had 12 of them. Somehow it lost its memory of them. Beauty scene. I started making something like this. I guess I didn't save it. So a box. Oh no, we can say color rect. I know you can't see this, but color rect, and it's gonna be red. Make it all the way red. All the way red. No green. No blue. Okay. And then save scene, bounce. And then we need an animation system, so we need an animation tree, I believe is what it's called. No root node for this. Path to animation player node containing animations is not set. I don't need animation tree, that's incorrect. I need animation player. Right, so now when I click on that, a new animation, and we're going to call this one bouncy, or just bounce. Also an add track, and we add property track for the rectangle and its position, right? And this is a game engine, so you don't have a fixed frame rate, so it uses time rather than it uses explicit time rather than frames. But I think we said 20 or whatever. I'll just make it something that fits on the screen. Okay. Maybe I can zoom out. Yeah, so 10. And then position here, we say keyframe, insert keyframe. Yes, this is what I see. Use Bezier curves. Create reset tracks. Create. I don't want to do rotation. I want to do location. Oh, it's already there. Yeah, I found the interaction a little confusing, but I think if I say boom, yeah, then it makes another one. It actually doesn't draw boxes here. It just draws dots. Maybe I'm thinking of Flash. By default, it does do interpolation. So the track has easing associated with it. All right, so I'm going to call this red box, and then duplicate it, and we'll have blue box. And blue box will be over here somewhere. Is this the anchor point of this? What is? I don't fully understand what that is. Yes, changes their anchors instead of their off. This doesn't matter. For the sake of argument, it doesn't matter. I mean, for the sake of this presentation, what I'm doing, it doesn't matter. Make this nice blue. Okay, so a drab blue. Okay. And I do want this same kind of thing. I want it grouped by, but I think you can actually ungroup it like that. A red box position. And so now if I say blah, 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 and record this one, I am going to use Bezier curves. I'm going to see what the difference is. Oh. Interesting. There's a button I can, that was the whole screen. Here we go. Okay, so hide all that other stuff. Can't make it smaller than this, okay? But you can make the screen bigger. What did it do? What does this actually say? Position X and position Y. Oh, you can do frames here. Interesting. 10 frames per second. You want like 24 frames per second, right? And then I said I wanted it to be like 60. This is actually kind of nice. I think I had 30 frames. Right. So this should be a 1 second animation. And then this would be on. Oh, interesting. So the thing where I actually get to edit that is not there when I zoom in like this. I don't know if I like that at all. Because in Godot you can't really hide only this side. You can't, you know. You should have some way to see the inspector for that. Or maybe not. Maybe it doesn't matter. But I would think you'd want to edit this like all the time. Like that would be like something very important to do. So time is actually 20 is what I wanted. And then for the other one, for all of these, I can select them, then the time should be 30. But I can't. And we're going to zoom in so we can see the number 30. Right, and then the time will be 34. And when we play, right, okay. This position should be down here at this point. Record it with a keyframe. And then up here, it's all right. Right. And why did the line go away? Oh, the line was indicating that it was the same. The line indicated that it was the same. Right. Not that there was a tween, but that the line that the value was the same. So I'm going to put it back up here. And then, is this changing as I go? No, it's not. So if I have to click the keyframe to make it happen. Okay, so it tweens by default. If I put this one on here, what does I say? If I set it to discrete, now what happens? That's a property for the whole track. With when you have control over the individual frames, discrete is just you put two different keyframes next to each other, and then there's no tween in between them because the time is quantized. But here you could have many more frames per second than there would be because it's a game engine. It's different. It's real time. It does make sense that you could have X and Y separate from each other. And then I noticed these don't have, what is this? What does this button do? I guess you cannot actually rearrange these. They're always grouped by, it's just whether you display them that way or not. There's a choice in whether you display them separately, but choice is always the same. And then snap, what is this? Snap is again because you don't have individual frames. What is happening here is taking a two-dimensional point and it's giving a separate track that shows how this changes over time. I've never used this. And all right, let's just add a keyframe here for the blue box. We'll add a location keyframe. Same. Let's move it down over here. Add the keyframe again. Now they're separate. Right now it's just a linear progression. I don't like this user interface actually. That's interesting. I mean, I guess it's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. And it certainly makes sense for things like sizing and whatnot, where you don't have. Okay, I guess what I'm saying is not that I don't like the user interface, is that for position in particular, I would much rather see the line out here in the space. But I guess this makes sense because for things that are not position, you might still want to use a Bezier curve. The thought just ran through my head, like, why am I trying to duplicate this? Why am I writing my own tool for this? Because clearly there's a lot of cool stuff in here that I've never even explored, but it's not so that I can have an animation tool that does everything. I've never used this. I don't need this right now. it's a nice to have. This is a feature for the far future. I need tweens. I need plain linear tweens with maybe some easing. You know, the path is going to be straight. If I want to change the path, I can do that. But I want, and I would like to draw for paths. I would like to draw for position. I would like to draw a path on the screen. I don't need these Bezier curves for anything else. For my use case, maybe as I develop as an animator, I will realize, yes, I do want that all the time and whatnot. But like, I've never used that before. Simple easings are not for me. I don't even know what these columns do. But what do you put? So what if you're the last item in the box? I mean, if you're the last. So we make this like 100. The easing is just there. It's set by default. Oh, okay. So because there's no keyframe, there's just no easing. Okay, so in the Godot world, a keyframe for whatever reason called a key edit, but a track key has a time, which would be a frame number, and has a value, which could be, like in this case, it's a oh, these are actually points on the Bezier curve, and then on this one, so it actually has a lot of information about it. And then on this one, we have easing. So we have X value, Y value. So there's some object associated with it, associated with that particular property. Like just whatever you would need to track that property plus either easing or the XY values of the Bezier curve. I'm not going to mess with Bezier curves for this. I think there's a different kind of track. Oh, maybe I will come back to this later when I do, if and when I do the Bezier tracks. That's way down on my list anyway. So to get back to it, the reason I want to do it the reason I'm writing my own is not because of the basic animation stuff. It's that the animation tools that I see don't have the things that Smalltalk has, or that other drawing tools have, that are like the actual drawing part, right? I want to do drawing. I want to do illustrations. I don't want to make general animations. I'm not making, cartoons. I'm making an animation that is the same, where I'm drawing the same kind of things that are, boxes and arrows, and I want to be able to draw the control points on a Bezier curve because I'm making an arrow that is curved, and I want to draw that in the scene, and then maybe even draw more curves in the scene that I can use as paths for things to come along. If I want something to like loop in or whatever. I also want physics, but I want the physics to not to be real-time physics, but physics to generate the animation, and that's counter to the way Godot works. I suppose I should look at how Blender does physics, but that's a small use case. I don't have an actual use for that. That's on my wish list, like nice to have kind of thing. I definitely want diagrams. I definitely want like the text in space kind of thing. I want things to be moving around. Simple tween, simple animations. I want to draw diagrams, and I want to be able to generate those diagrams from data structures that I'm writing algorithms about, right? And not necessarily in Smalltalk, right? They're going to be in like some language, right? I have plans to write making a series of videos about programming languages. I'm going to build a programming language. The language is called Implish, and then there's another language called B4 assembler, like B4A, and it's going to be like a very low level stack language. I want to be able to write stuff in that. Implish is more of a array language, right? So I want to be able to draw arrays and highlight different cells and things like that. You can definitely do it in Godot, but it's not as easy. And then when you're talking about trees and graphs and stuff, like I want the graph layout tools to be in the system. And maybe what I should be doing is porting those graph layout tools to Godot. But I saw something, I see something in the Smalltalk way of doing things where it's a live image and you can edit the tool while you're building it, because I don't know what I want. The tool itself is experimental. And so I'm willing to experiment with things. Anyway, so that answers my internal self-doubt. Point is, I committed to making this. I'm going to make it. I'm going to see what happens. I'm going to follow it through for a couple weeks. I said on August 5th, that's the day I'm going to read. That was a 6-week point, and I said I'm going to reconsider my path in life or whatever when it comes to software here. But up until that point, so that's a couple weeks away still. Okay. 3 more weeks. No. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 3 weeks and a couple days. I'm at the halfway point. I'm so far I'm happy with this. I like this idea of linear. I think we just say it's just always going to be linear. Like by default, it'll be linear. I'm not going to make it optional. It'll always be there. If there's no next item, then too bad. Okay, so we always have a keyframe, a value, and the value is 2 things. It's an array with 2 slots. It's, for now, it's the easing and the value and the easing. And that's it. Okay, so that was an extended design discussion. Now, now I need to actually change the cache to do this. So I need to interpolate between those values. If I want discrete, I put 2 individual keyframes. So there's always, except for that case, there is always an interpolation. No, that's not true. If there's no next keyframe, if there's no previous keyframe, there's no interpolation. But that's already covered by the fact that we're just adding one extra. Do I even need that? Yeah, value at frame, we clamp it between the 1 and the cache size. So the cache size just goes to the last frame. And for now, we're forcing it to have a first frame, even though I think that's probably not going to be the case going forward. Like in Godot there, you can actually, you don't have to have an initial state. So whatever the initial state is, it just keeps everything in the same place until you start this animation. So you could actually move these like way over here or something like that. And so then wherever the red box is it stays there until, oh wait, no. Oh yeah, it does. So the red box, hang on. Red box is staying put. And then, oh, interesting. So it actually does just, it doesn't, it acts as if this is the first key, or the first step. And then it just moves it to wherever the first point is. Okay, that's interesting. In other words, this stays, it acts as if there's a keyframe here and it's the same. But whatever. So, okay, that's not what I expected. That's not how I thought Godot worked. But for now, we're just going to always force you to have a keyframe for frame 0. The number should be between 0 and the cache size -1. Because even though Smalltalk doesn't have frame 0, I don't know. I like frame 0. I like the idea of a 0. Okay, so when we add the keyframes with keys, then we're going to, as ordered dictionary, this is what matters. This is the only thing that matters. As we go through, frames equals value times add x minus previous. Previous equals 0. So right now, the only time I even look at the values is right here. And it just makes a copy of those. Well, it doesn't make a copy of those values. It knows what the runs are. I wonder if maybe what I want here is a variation on run array. Run array. At set run offset and value. I think all I do is I, instead of saying cache at, I say cache at this, return cache at, and then set run offset and value. Why do we call set run offset and value? Does this tell me the length of the run? The limit equals run size? Index it to runs and values. Value for this run. And then we're going to say, okay, so we have the run, the offset, and the value. Okay. And then we want to return the value. That's what at does right now. At over here does this. Run offset value, and it returns the value. That's it. Okay. Which same as this, right? This should be exactly the same. If I run this again. Oh. Array did not understand extent, right? So that's my problem. But now this is, so I say value first, because now I've changed it from the point to the point plus the easing. Do this again, we should be back to where we started. Okay. But if I put this here, now if I say, close this, hide all this stuff. I think JS animator examples, bouncing square, timeline, view model track. What do we get here? Track data first. Track data. TL model equals this. And then TLM track data at TLM track names first. And that should give me the track model. Okay, and now I want to call this function value at frame. I'll call this TM is this, and then TM value at frame, I'll call this track model. Track model value at frame 5. This gives me a point, right? Because I just asked for that. Okay, but now if I just say run offset and then value is all this. This has broken the app, but now I want to see what I get back. 1.5. So I'm in the first run. And if I say track model keyframes, rather here, self keyframes at run plus 1. Or rather, self cache at, oh wait, hang on. IX plus 1. No. What I want to do is I want to store the length of each value. So keyframes values. Or if I just have, okay, if I just have the run array runs is 10, 5, 5, 5, 3, 2, and the values are A, B, C. That acts as if it's this. RA runs 3, 2, 1. So RA runs is an index into that. Okay, so all right, so what I can say is RA runs, so cache so len len is equal to cache runs run, runs at run. And so now if I return len here, see what I get. I would expect it to be 10, right? 10. All right, maybe we'll even say run associated with this, len is associated with this, offset associated with this, and val is associated with this. Just so I can see what's going on here. So len, val, and ease, right? Easing and easing. That's the duration in frames of this thing. I'm going to interpolate right here is what I'm getting at. So then val equals value first, easing equals value second, we'll actually call this val now, and then easing is ease. I'm curious, can you just return this context? If you want to inspect things at that point? Yeah, that's easier. Okay. Although it didn't actually assign them. That's interesting. Okay, well. What if you just say this context here without the return? I wonder why that happens. Why it doesn't include the latest changes. All right, well, anyway, now you know how to, that was the point of doing all this stuff. So run, length, offset, body. All right, so BL easing process? No. Perform ease, perform value second. Easing equals Now easing would be one, you know, so it was a symbol, so now we've mapped it to one of these classes. And then we got to figure out how the easing works. Easing, so BL easing perform linear gives me back a BL linear interpolator. Interpolate a number, so that's an identity. Interpolate. So if instead we say BL, comment this out for a second. We say in bounce in, I think was one of them. And it has an interpolate. And so this is going to take a fraction. And so we need to interpolate what? We have the run, we have the offset. We can get cache at, okay, so we have cache at, hang on. So the length, the offset into the length. So offset is offset divided by, or offset over cache runs at run. This needs to be in parentheses. So I don't ask that. So fraction, the fraction equals this. So the fraction equals this. Fraction goes offset over that, and then the easing is this. I'm not even gonna give this a name. So then easing interpolate this. Oh, I do need easing. So easing but easing generally would be between two things. So meta. Okay, so this is only going to convert one fraction into another fraction. So easing fraction equals this. So that's the interpolated version of the fraction. And then run is less than keyframes size minus 1. So if we're less, if we're not the last keyframe, if true, then we're going to say next or rather, or if run equals keyframe size, if true, then that's easy. We return fraction times. No, we just return if run equals keyframes to true. Yeah, okay. Right at the start, if run is equal to keyframe size, if we're at the last keyframe, then we return value second. Return value second. So guard the last keyframe never has interpolation. Otherwise, and if false, now we need to figure out the easing and the fraction. And easing actually, we return value first. Then we say the next value next is equal to value is equal to keyframes at run plus 1. Get that keyframe and we give it, and we get the first value out of it, and or rather the next key. Next key the easing is get that value second. So say this key and next key. This key is value first. In fact, we could call this up. We could say this key. This key is value first, and then we'll just return this key. Otherwise, next key is the next keyframe first, and then the easing is the second part of the keyframe. And then the fraction is this. Cache runs at run, right? So the offset divided by the cache runs at run, okay. And now what? Self-halt. Okay. I believe this now works correctly for value at like 55 because oh, it doesn't. Instance of point did not understand run. Run equals this. Oh, I didn't. Hang on. I'm probably missing a period or something. run equals this. Yeah, value first. This key equals value first. That's it. Right, so I would expect this to work now, and it should return just whatever the last keyframe is. That returns that point, because that's the last one. There's no interpolation involved. But if we say at 15, it's going to halt now because of the I explicitly put a halt. Oh no, but before that it died. Key 3 not found in dictionary. Oh, because this is an ordered dictionary, right? And so I want the item, the nth item, but I want the value. So values at something like that. There's like a quick way to get the nth item out of a association at. We get value at. Is there a value at? Values do no. I think association at is what I want. The dictionary association at a key. Oh wait, no. Key at index. Is there a value at index? No, because you don't know. So key at index. So blah blah blah. Keyframes at keyframes key at index round plus 1. Right. All right, so now I think that gets me all the way to the end, and then let's see. Yeah, so now I hit the halt. All right, so where am I at? How do you open the little editor thing now? Right, whatever. All right, so that worked. And so now at that point, what I want to do is I want to say, now I need to map that interpolation fraction to an actual value between those 2 points. Color interpreter, abstract interpolator. Number interpolator. You give it a start and a stop, and then you interpolate between the two. So NS number interpolator. It should, looks like it would work with a point too, so. So NS number interpolator start is this key. Stop interpolator new, right? Yeah, these are instances. So NS number interpolator new, stop, new, start, stop, next key, and then interpolate on the fraction. And that's it. If this works, it does. It did return a fraction. But let's see what happens. Let's see what happens when we run this, because I think unless block dies on fractions, I think this works. Boom, boom, boom. Oh yeah. It does not go all the way back to 0 though. Okay, so if offset is, all right, so when we got to make a little bit of an adjustment. So offset of 0 here. So value at frame 0, what do we get? Negative 25 and 200. Did I get actually to negative 25 and 200? That's where I started, right? That should be correct. Oh, but it says frame 1. Frame 20, frame 10, this is frame 1, and this is also frame 1. This is correct, but the value doesn't come back as 1. So the error is actually in the snap to frame. I want a GS timeline. That's all. So GS timeline, and just go ahead and make one, which I think I have somewhere. Maybe. Okay. it just never goes to frame 1. So then self frame from playhead is 0. Oh, so that's right. The problem is this, it's 0, and it never changes from anything to 0. So the actual problem is this. Current frame equals frame. And then after this, we have to set current frame equals frame. And that's the fix. All right, so I believe this now works. Go back here, animation timeline. And I believe this will both take me back to 0, and yes, it does. It does take me back to 0, but it does not quite do what I expected. This should be exactly on the floor at frame 10. And it's not, so it's off by 1. Right, so I think yeah. And I bet if I go to here, it's exactly where I want it to be, and then here it stays the same, yeah. So I just need to subtract 1 somewhere. This timeline. You don't need this anymore, don't need this anymore. Let's get rid of this. For dictionary, you don't need this. I was just bring that. So GS animator is where I'm at, GS track mode. I think we just say offset -1. I think it starts at 1 instead of 0. And that's what we wanted to say. So GS track model, whoops. Perfect. Perfect. No. What? I think we do the -1 up a little bit different place. Instead of offset -1, we had this +1 up here. I think that's what it is. Maybe try that. I'm guessing here, but I think that might be the problem. That looks right. I don't know if you saw it before, but it was like jumping ahead to the next animation. That's perfect. Oh. That's weird. This is perfect. This is weird. Wait, I gave it a bounce, didn't I? Is this right? Yeah, this is bounce out. So if I give this linear, this works. Oh, I gotta rebuild it. Nope, it does not work. That's perfect. I still have one little bit of an off by 1 error right there. But I think it's when I'm doing that clamping there. I did some clamping right at. Do some clamping somewhere, not in timeline, but in track model. Cache size -1, 0 in cache size. My brain is telling me that really should be there, but if this works, I'm gonna just ignore my brain. This works, and that works, and everything's perfect. Pretty cool. All right. 1:38. I have about an hour before I have to go pick up my daughter from camp. Got easing set up, but one thing I noticed is that well, Rosal comes with a, so Rosal is another visualization library. Rosal easings, RS easing. Oh, these are RS easing interpolator tests. But I'm not seeing them. They didn't. It's not included in here. But the point is that these interpolations exist. These interpolators exist in Smalltalk, and they're probably almost exactly the same for Block and Rosal. Do I need them? No, I do not. I do. I mean, you know, to make this a product, do I need it for a minimum viable product? No. So that's not the next thing to do. Next thing to do is probably something to do with drawing. So actually drawing a scene. So I can actually like add things to this scene, give them names, and that kind of thing. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this down. I'm going to check this code in, and then I'm going to, you know, so end the stream, close this down, and then, you know, post a little animation of that, or, you know, a little recording of that ball bouncing around, and then I'm going to come back and, oh, okay. So what I also need is the scaling for that, you know, because I do want to stretch and squash that thing, change the extents or the size or whatever, and I want to maybe even do some rotation so it looks like it's, you know, it's actually kind of like, you know, bouncing, so it's not just a flat thing. I'm not going to be able to do with what I've got now. I can't make this go in an arc. Easing is not, that's not what easing is. So if I want this to follow a path, that would be actually drawing a Bezier curve. So let's see where I'm at here. Yes, this is done. Autoplay entire animation. Yeah, that's important. I've got tweens. Yes. I've got interpolation. Or, you know, interpolation. Okay, so these are done. These are done. Autoplay the entire animation. Yeah, that's important. That's actually probably not as soon as possible. Set keyframe from current value. So drag items in scene to set keyframes. All right, so recording it. So now the editor. So scene editor. Scene editor drawing tool. I think that's important. And then the other thing I said was the more than one track. More than one track, multiple tracks. Multiple tracks. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna break these into other tasks or whatever. And I'm just gonna end this here. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in a little bit. I don't know if it's gonna be right away. I might have to do some planning and come back later this afternoon. I probably won't just start another stream right away. So I'll see you in a couple hours. All right.